Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om Tare Tu Tare.
All right, well, here we are, Wednesday. We didn't die last night. Feeling pretty good about that. And we have another opportunity to come together and cultivate wisdom and merit, the path of awakening. The teaching that we're embarking upon, I know some of you were here last week. If you were not, we are embarking upon a 4-volume series created by His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama in conjunction with Thubten Chödron on really trying to bring the whole essence of the path, the whole Lam Rim structure and teachings to a Western mind, and trying to address things that might be misunderstood and how they can be approachable. Hence, the first book is Approaching the Buddhist Path. So it's really great that they spent years, decades to tease out how can we present this in a way that's meaningful here. I think it was 10 years for the first sort of final version of this. So here we are, unpacking it. Last week we got right into a very straightforward key point of Buddhism, and that's the mind is the issue, mind being primary. And so here we'll see how far we get, but in this opening section, His Holiness is wanting to explain where Buddhism sort of fits in the world and what it is and what it is not. And so this first section is really trying to give context to Buddhism. And then the next piece that we'll get into is then what is mind, and get into some of those components. But right here, it's try to give some perspective, some context for Buddhism. Having said that, let's pop open the text right where we're at. So this first section, the purpose of existence and the meaning of life. That shouldn't take long, probably a couple paragraphs. So he's not going to explain the whole purpose of existence or the meaning of life here. There is a book, though, that he did write called The Meaning of Life. Yeah. But instead, he's going to take this, this sort of core approach to Buddhism. So this is coming from the middle course, middle length discourses. And he's quoting the Buddha right off the bat. For the most part, beings have this wish, desire and longing. Wish, desire, and longing. If only unwished for, undesired, disagreeable things would diminish, right? Wouldn't that be great if they went away? And wished for, desired, agreeable things would increase. Sounds pretty good. All right. Yet, although beings have this wish, desire, and longing, unwished for, undesired, disagreeable things increase for them, and wished for, desired, agreeable things diminish. So this is the core. This is what got the Buddha's attention. Like, why, if we all want happiness and we all want these things, why does just the opposite happen? What's going on as we age, get sick, die? If we all want things to be comfortable and happy and well and inner peace, how do we get frustration, anger, resentment, and fear? So this is where the Buddha starts. He didn't start at how the earth come into existence. He didn't start at any of those things. He started at, here's this unusual phenomenon. We're smart, we're capable, we know how to do things that'll make us feel good. I want to feel good, and yet my life is filled with things that are painful, frustrating, disagreeable. And even when I get what I want, even that joy from that thing can diminish, right? It's not that exciting now. A lot of people aren't that thrilled about their flip phones anymore. I used to have like a Razor flip phone. Razor was the cool one. You know, I said, wow, got a Razor. And yeah, I don't think people are too hip on those anymore. Yeah, I agree. So, or what about a 19-inch color TV? Woo! Yeah, that was a big thing. Went from black and white. So even the things that we get that we appreciate and enjoy, you know, they tend, even the value of them in our hearts and mind diminish, and we take them for granted things. So this is where he starts, and this is where the Buddha started. Again, not on what is, you know, what created the earth. And right here in the blue, I noted, and this is His Holiness, the 14th Dalai Lama speaking, I do not know of an overarching purpose for the existence of this world. And from the Buddhist viewpoint, there's not a clear explanation. We simply say that the existence of the world is due to causes and conditions, to nature. The existence of this universe is a fact. How existence came into being and the possibility of ending suffering are quite different issues. We do not need to know how the world began in order to stop our suffering. So that is a very different approach, right? We don't need to know how the world began to end our suffering. I often, get a wide range of questions when I was a monk, and we would travel, and we'd give cultural events and teachings, and run into all different types of philosophies, religions, and questions. And you know, one of the common ones was, you know, do Buddhists believe in God? And I once said, you know, that's kind of an irrelevant question to a Buddhist. And, you know, it was like, kind of took them by surprise, you know. In other words, and not to say that there is or isn't, and there are actually some Buddhists who believe in God. So there are some, and that was my real answer. Yeah, some do, most don't. Not in any type of a creator God. It's not really part of the Buddhist philosophy, sort of understanding of creation. But what he's saying there is we really don't know. So it's not the point. And you don't need to know to get rid of suffering. Creator God, not a creator God. Ultimately, it doesn't matter. And he's saying here, he makes this little point that if we all, even if a person who doesn't know the purpose for the existence of the universe doesn't want to suffer, such a person would never think, well, because there's no plan or big purpose, I'll just let myself suffer. You know, like just because I don't know, I'm still going to try not to suffer. Doesn't matter. And this is the pragmatic approach. If you look at the Buddhist teachings, basically, he saw people suffering. He asked, is this necessary? Why does this happen? And is it, can we remove it? The causes for this, the cessation. So that's something that just, you know, he's always given context right here. That I don't know how the world began. It's not necessary to know. And using Buddhist logic and reasoning, which we're very big on, cause, effect, cause, effect. If you keep tracing back, you know, nothing cannot create something. So how did something come from nothing? Doesn't really make sense beyond our comprehension. So often in Buddhism, they just talk about beginningless time because you can't really figure it out. But not necessary. And so these big philosophies and understandings about purpose of life, different religions, and he'll talk about that more in a few pages, come into being. And here, His Holiness is offering one view. The purpose of our life is happiness and peace, an internal feeling of well-being. To bring that about, we need material development and proper education. We also need spiritual development. By spirituality, I do not mean religious belief or rituals. For me, spirituality refers to the basic good qualities of human beings, such as compassion, affection, gentleness, and humility. When these qualities are well established in our hearts, we will have more peace of mind and will contribute to the happiness of others. Someone can be happy without religious beliefs, but not without these basic good qualities. So in a spiritual way of life, understanding my connection to others, as we talked about last week, the dependently arising experience that we're having and how others contribute to the quality of life that we have, and that we're a part of this, that we're entwined with each other, that naturally we would want to be a fully engaged participant there if we had this type of happiness and understanding. But I'm going to back up one sec here. The purpose of our life is happiness and peace. So a lot of times that gets a shortcut that Dalai Lama says the purpose is to be happy. So that means I can eat all the hot dogs I want, or ice cream, or indulge in hedonistic pleasures. Be happy. That's not at all what he's saying here. And as we unpack Buddhism over the course of these volumes, it's going to be clear that the grasping to those types of activities is actually going to create unhappiness and a lack of peace. So the happiness and peace he's talking about, where it seems so right here on the surface, very clear and plain, he's actually talking about our very nature is that. And the peace is that we get to realize that that is our nature. Free of mental afflictions, free of desire, free of frustration, free of fear, free of these things. That when we're liberated from all those things, our very nature is this happiness and peace. It's not conditioned. It's not afflicted. It's our nature. So he's saying here then, in the bigger context, that the purpose is to understand our nature, which is blissful, luminous, loving, compassionate. It's very nature. So he's not telling us to, go out and, I don't know, when I think of happiness, I think of a banana split, but just saying, not that that's a bad thing, it's just not precisely what he's saying. And getting a banana split for somebody, that could be a great cause for happiness. Okay, I'm going to let go of the banana split now. I need to put it over there. So when you see a bumper stick, it's simple, life is to be happy. He's talking about this much deeper sense of well-being that is our very nature. So it's not this sort of conditioned happiness that's dependent upon stimulus and these very short-term pleasures which come and go, but rather the very nature. So when we remove all the concepts and constructs of the mind, when we remove our misperceptions, when we remove all that cognitive activity, this is going to be there. It's always there. It's always available. It's always there. And the things that we do to get it often prevent us from recognizing it. So that's going back to, if we want this happiness, why does it diminish? Because the very things that we're doing to experience that are the things that prevent us from having it. So they attribute the qualities of happiness in the things, people, events, the activities outwardly that we're experiencing as the source. And so it's this layer of misperception, this layer of affliction, which impedes that. And we will, he's going to unpack that. But I think it's good to not just get a mistake right off the bat, because you could read that as the purpose of our life is to be happy. Yeah. But it is. But the very nature of ourself there. And in order to do that, we need spiritual development. So the other points he's making here is, and I love that he says, we need material development and proper education. A lot of people will engage in these teachings and right off the bat think, well, I don't need all that stuff. Stuff doesn't make you happy. Don't need that stuff. And even in modern Western psychology, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, your basic needs are met. You have food, you have clothing, you have shelter, you have safety. So education, healthcare, things of that nature. So not to minimize that, but he brought right up, okay, we need this to be okay. And then we also need the spiritual development that goes along with it. So there are those who can, having had those other conditions met, achieve a spiritual development that requires less and less of those things. But a lot of people will kind of cast those out and think I don't need them and suffer a lot. So let's bear in mind a good solid foundation that is supportive, healthy, meets our basic physiological and emotional needs and has safety, and then also include the spiritual development. And he's saying that without religion, you can be happy. Without the spiritual principles that he's talking around about compassion and kindness and ethics, one cannot be. I'm just going to take a breath there and a drink of water, so in case anyone has something that I want to comment on. And so, again, breaking it down to just some clarity, sentient beings. And that's a word we'll use a lot. It's not all beings, it's sentient beings, conscious beings. But in this, it has a very specific context. All beings with minds that are not fully awakened. So, for example, Buddhas and Bodhisattvas would not be in a category of sentient beings. They're conscious, but they're beyond samsara. So basically, when we're saying sentient beings in this context, we're talking about beings that are in samsara, that are in a conditioned existence. They don't recognize their own qualities, their own nature, and we're obscured. So all beings with minds that are not fully awakened experience two types of happiness and suffering: physical happiness and suffering, which occur at the level of our senses, and the mental and emotional happiness and suffering, which occurs at the mental level. As human beings, we are not different from animals, insects, and other beings with bodies. We are all basically the same in terms of seeking physical comfort. Right? Come on, the cat that gets that little warm spot on the linoleum and the floor there, oh yeah, I'm going to get in there. Or take the dog's bed. We want that comfort. We want something that's going to feel good. Bear scratch him on a tree. We want that. So we want that comfort and we want to avoid pain. That's physical. But in terms of mental and emotional happiness and suffering, we human beings are very different from other species. We have human intelligence and thus have more capacity to think, remember, explain, and examine. For example, unlike animals, human beings may suffer mentally when they remember injustices their ancestors experienced. We may speculate about the future and become anxious or furious about situations that haven't occurred yet. Due to our imagination, we are much more sensitive on a mental level and experience so much joy and misery that is created by our mind. Because mental suffering is created by conceptions in our mind, countermeasures that are likewise mental are important. Toward this end, human beings have developed various religions, philosophies, psychological theories, and scientific hypotheses. So as Holiness is pointing out, yeah, we're a different creature, aren't we? Going back to the teaching last week, how much of our mental emotional suffering is mental, and he's pointing out things that haven't happened yet. We can get really angry, frustrated, have an incredible resentment over feeling that somebody treated us with disrespect. Right? People kill people for you didn't respect me. Injustices, fears, worries, concerns, the meaning that we bring to an event. What was the show they used to do on Bridezillas or something about a wedding? I mean, a lot of pressure around that in an event, right, at a wedding, and what it needs to look like, or bar mitzvahs, or different things that we do, rites of passage. How much importance we put on something, how much fear we bring up around it. So with our minds, we're creating these expectations, these worries, these fears, and we don't even realize we're bringing the meaning to them. It's not inherent in the event. And even very spiritual practices and activities, going to see His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama, you're going to see a lot of attachment and a lot of fear and a lot of insecurity and pushing and shoving. And so even in situations like that, there can be such a grasping to want to be close that we're kind of stepping on people while we're listening to a teaching on compassion. It happens quite, at those events. So here we've got the physical and we've got the mental. And if we go back to the opening quote, we're going to find that we can suffer more from both throughout our lives. Physically, our conditioning in terms of course, aging, sickness, and death, but how we climatize what we're used to, what we're used to having to be comfortable, whether it's beds at a certain thickness or a certain firmness, or things that we get acclimated to that become very uncomfortable when we're not in those situations. Heat, air conditioning, things like that. Notice living in India, when it's over 100 degrees and humid and wet, and like 102 and shade felt pretty good. 102, the shade out here, not so good. I'm not used to that anymore. And just how that varies, what we get used to. And then I still think one of the most torturous things that ever happens is when the vacuum just doesn't pick up that one little thing, and then you actually, after 10, 12 tries, have to bend over and pick it up yourself. It's just wrong. I mean, that's just wrong. It's frustrating. And, just these little things that you get used to, have to copy and paste that whole thing again. We used to have a typewriter where we had to actually retype stuff, and, imagine. Yeah. Wow. What it has to be. And, oh man, close the tab. I have to type in that whole web address again. It's incredibly tough. And it can get so frustrating, right? We talked about stuck in traffic last time. I just traveled on the plane. And coming back, we landed early. It's cool. 15 minutes early. And then the pilot comes on and says, so we're going to have to wait here for about 15 minutes because we're early. And there's no one to bring you to the gate. So you can just watch the difference between early to, oh man, we're on time. What a bummer, we're on time. Yeah. And we have to wait. And you could just watch the mental and emotional things that go on with things of that nature. And we don't see it. We just, life's this way, or that's frustrating, this is stressful, or, that's joyful. So he's just making observations at this point. And the thing about our intelligence, which he brought up, is that going back here, we have the capacity to think, remember, explain, and examine. And I like the word capacity because I don't know that we actually do much thinking, remembering, explaining, or, well, we do a lot of explaining. I do a lot of explaining. Let me explain what happened. And that wasn't my fault. No, you're pretty good at that. But do I remember that I've been frustrated, 100,000 times and that I'm okay today? Do I remember that? Or do I get frustrated again? Do I remember that, these moments in my life, that were so joyful have come and gone and I can be frustrated now? Do I remember? Do I examine that? Or do I just forget all of that and don't think, examine, and remember and engage in a new day? Completely forgetting that I've actually survived every challenge in my life, and how things are today in my life are actually ones I had only hoped for ever. And it's incredible. And yet I can worry or it not be good enough in a moment today. And so Buddhism's actually going to ask us to do these things to cultivate that capacity to think, to remember, and to examine. What's the true causes of happiness? What's the true causes? What's a lasting happiness? If I'm seeking happiness, and am I actually doing things that create it, or am I doing things that create desire or attachment? Am I confusing love with attachment? Do I love that person, or do I love how they make me feel when they act in a particular way, and not love them when they don't act in a particular way? Am I loving them, or am I loving what they do for me when they act in a particular way? Do I examine? Or do I just do a lot of things, not even consciously being present in why I'm doing those things? Do I notice the difference between what's actually happening and my worries and fears about what may happen? So we have this capacity, and throughout these volumes, we're going to be encouraged to use that capacity. But I find it amazing how often I can not be utilizing that capacity. So I'm not even conscious of what I'm doing. And then he made this point at the end. To this end, human beings have developed various religions, philosophies, psychological theories, and so forth. And so he's saying, okay, so to counter these concepts, countermeasures are here. And so that's where we get therapy, religion, different philosophies, and science is getting involved to try to reduce stress, to try to cultivate more happiness, to try to counteract these afflictive states. I was observing in just the world that we get to participate in. I talked about the flip phone. Now we have computers. I can look up literally anything. And how much something like this has taken us away from being present in our own lives, right? If my mind's distracted on something, looking up something, reading something, watching something, whatever, it's in that. It cannot be here in what I'm doing, nor can it be available to reflect, to analyze, to contemplate, to create something new and different. If my mind is constantly filled with distraction, something to think about, something to worry about, there's no space. There is no space available for creativity, for something to ponder, for gratitude, to take the time to reflect. I was just thinking on the way to the flight back, just what a gift it was. As many of you know, I've got a new grandson, and just thinking about the life that I have. It was 9 years ago yesterday that I moved to Carbondale and got a wife out of the deal, and just sitting there thinking, wow, a little picture with my little U-Haul and coming up, and thinking about what an incredible life to have kids and grandkids, to be healthy, to be well, to live where I live, to have people in my life that I have. None of that will arise when I'm busy doing email, checking the news, scanning this or that. None of that's available. My attention is somewhere else. And you've heard me say, more than once that, there was a day in the not too distant past where people had 9-to-5 kind of jobs and phones, dial phones, which eventually came out with voice recorders, right? What do they call them? Voice answering machines. We used to have answering machines. And but when you left work, you're pretty much off work. Almost nobody's off work anymore. Emails, texting, things to do, things to plan. And so if I don't take time to set that aside, to create space in my life, to be a participant in my life, we're going to note, is my life gotten happier because of all this stuff? Or has my life gotten busier, fuller, and often quite stressed? I was with daughters and granddaughters in a very urban area with soccer moms, literally, and softball moms, and things that they're doing, and all the activities and things that we do, and the things that people are involved in. And what was really refreshing was my granddaughter would say, "So you want to play cards?" Like, yeah, let's do that. I mean, she didn't need to keep beating me, but phase 10 and to play cards. She likes playing card games. She likes playing board games. That was really refreshing. And what a great quality time. We actually even did some of that miniature golf stuff. You got a lot of time when you're playing miniature golf. So I just want to invite people to, start to think about, why do we need so many countermeasures? Why do we need so much therapy and counseling and crisis management? And I would suggest that a lot of that is because so many people have got more stuff and more things that they think will bring them pleasure that are actually creating more responsibility and distraction and taking them away from playing gin rummy. We didn't play gin rummy. We played phase 10. Yeah. It's okay. They taught me how to do it. I would have gotten better at it, I'm pretty sure. So the art of having a conversation with someone. Now we have texting. And just that qualities. And you mentioned you came by our house the other day, just seeing the garden, and you even suggested, well, maybe I'd knock on the door next time. How rare is it to have someone knock on your door that you don't know is already coming these days, right? It's a rare thing. So there's all of these countermeasures that have been developed. And so we've got it with psychology, we've got science, and a lot of the things that are being created to cultivate well-being are actually more complicated. And I might get on a soapbox if I haven't been already. I remember being at a talk, and a mindfulness talk, and talking about how to interrupt the distraction of the brain and things of that nature. And we have this thing called meditation for that, but they're actually talking about the cap you can put on your head that will set little electrodes and interrupt and give you peace. Like, I need another $10,000 piece of equipment to give me peace of mind, or a desensitizing float tank to eliminate things. Or I know there's one mental health facility that I've worked with that they have this chair that kind of distracts and does things, and does all these things to quiet the mind. Is very expensive. And I was thinking, a walk around the pasture with someone to listen to you talk might have calmed the mind too, right? And so in the world that we're living in, there's a lot of countermeasures that might be counterproductive. And now even a lot of white noise machines and things like that. Those are very common things, right? So as we get all this other stuff, we get other stuff to counter this stuff. And it's just taking us more away from what's underneath all that stuff is already happiness and well-being, which is not available because we've got layers of things, countermeasures. And so His Holiness wasn't going all there. I went there a little bit. He was talking about how we use psychology, religion, other things to counter that mind and to bring a sense of meaning and purpose and order to our lives that will provide us an opportunity for more ethical and purposeful living. Pause there for a moment, see if anyone has a thought or question, comment.
What's colored noise?
Did I say colored noise?
Well, you said
White noise.
Is it black noise or blue noise?
Good point. I don't know. Is there different colored noises, or is it just white noise?
And what is white noise?
And we all look at Laura.
Look at me right now. Well, I know that white noise can help, so that, let's say there's a therapist working with a client in a room and there's a hallway.
Right.
They might put a white noise machine right outside the door, so that if you're walking down the hallway, you don't get to hear the details, or vice versa. It might be inside the room to distract from the noises outside. So
What kind of noise?
it's a very nondescript sort of, I wouldn't say a hum, but it's some quality of sound that.
So like, shh. Or,
Some people say like a fan, like a giant box fan, that noise that it makes is sometimes.
so in case you don't hear that online, everybody here is having a very rich discussion about what white noise sounds like. And also can be used like with babies. That's another that kind of came in that, in this
Well, use it to go
rocker
to
things,
sleep.
to use it to go to sleep,
Yeah.
to ease their mind, and so forth. So, but as we cultivate more devices to make us more comfortable from, the busyness that we get in our mind. We sometimes get away from some of the more natural things that might suit us quite well. Let me see where we're at in the text. I know we're coming up to 7 o'clock already. So yeah, here's a point I do want to get to, and I think a good one to give context to Buddhism as well. So he's pointing out now a middle way between theistic religions and scientific reductionism. And he's talking about 3 general groups: those who are not interested in religion, those who believe and practice a religion, and those who are actively hostile to religion. And so he's going to talk about these different groups, but he's going to come up to a point that you can be ethical in pretty much any of these, right? You can be not interested in religion, have a pretty ethical way of living, some principles. You can be, and you could also be very materialistic and not give anything about ethics. You can be religious and be very ethical. You can be religious and not be very ethical. And those who are not, who are actually hostile to it, can also have some problems there. But what I want to get to is this, is that he goes on and talks a bit about different categories of people within these religions or non-religions or scientific ideals. But the main point here is, from one perspective, Buddhism is a religion and a spiritual discipline, right? So you could look at Buddhism as a religion. Because Buddhist precepts and meditation are directly linked to mental training, well, it's also a science of the mind, right? Neuroscience and all the things that we do with Buddhism. So from another viewpoint, since Buddhism does not accept an external creator, it's not a theistic religion, but a philosophy. So depending on how you look at Buddhism, we may describe it as a religion, a science of mind, or a philosophy. We do not need to say it's one and not the others, for Buddhism embraces aspects of all 3. And so this is one of the kind of interesting things that I hear about Buddhism a lot, and I think it's really a valuable discussion and provides a lot of clarity in my mind, is people say Buddhism is not a religion, it's a philosophy. And then you got all these monks and stuff in a monastery. Well, I don't know, it kind of feels like a religion. And what he's saying here is it doesn't fit into the basket. Lama Alan Wallace, it was really nice. He goes, we have our categories based on our Western view and how we've categorized things as religions and science and philosophy. Those are our categories. This Buddhism predates all that. It doesn't fit in any of them fully. And that's what His Holiness is saying. It just doesn't fit in those baskets. So it wouldn't, why someone would argue that it's a philosophy or religion, it's really, it doesn't fully fit any and all of those. It just doesn't fit in that box we want to put it in. It obviously aspects of Buddhism, philosophy, aspects, science of the mind, aspects are religious. But those are Western categories for something that was evolved much, much earlier than these categories. So it just doesn't fit. So it's not, it's not necessary to argue or try to put in a box. It's Buddhism, and aspects of Buddhism could be religious, could be a philosophy, could be, science of the mind science. And so I think that's really important. So we can save a lot of people arguing, whether it's a religion or philosophy, it's Buddhism. And there's some rituals and some things that are very religious, and there's some aspects that are not at all. So, and then he is making a point here that I think's good to know. So in contrast to religions that oppose critical investigation, Buddhism emphasizes that we should be skeptical, even of the Buddha's words. We have to investigate whether scriptural passages are reliable and true or not. The Buddha himself stated that his followers should not accept his teaching out of respect, but after investigation and personal experiment. We have the liberty to examine and test the Buddhist teachings. So, very scientific approach. So there's just prior to this key point, His Holiness was pointing out that a lot of scientific-minded people view religion in a very detrimental way and think it's a waste of time. And he's making a point here, they're kind of losing out because they're not opening their mind to the potentials and what can you measure and not measure. So, for example, they deny the existence of mind as immaterial phenomenon, as well as religious believers who assert external creator. So they're just completely missing out. How do you consciousness? What's consciousness? It's pretty hard to measure consciousness. They don't know how to approach that. But that doesn't mean it's irrelevant. Consciousness is pretty important. Love, how do you measure love? Can't see it, can't touch it. Does it exist? Does it not exist? I think we all would agree it exists. I think we agree consciousness exists. And but just because I don't have the tools to measure that doesn't mean it's irrelevant. And or the power of devotion and things of that nature. Though they are making some approaches there. I know Laura was talking to me about studies on mindset, how your mindset is and how that will radically change how you experience life and how you participate in it. And so, but that's core here to what Buddhism teaches. If I change my perspective on something or a belief about myself or a thing, I can have a very different experience. So he's making this point that, there's an opportunity here to not keep putting things into boxes and rather all of us investigate. On the other hand, while Buddhism shares respect for logic and experimental proof, it doesn't deny the value of having faith and confidence in spiritually realized beings. Since our five senses are limited in what they are capable of knowing, scientific tools are not amenable to investigating many existent phenomena. So it seems that Buddhism is in between science and theistic religions. And he's hoping that maybe this can be a bridge between the two. He's been working a lot on those. So I think that's a good place to pause. So a nice approach where he's just giving us a context here. And so easy to think of Buddhism as just a religion or a philosophy, when in fact, just fit in those categories. But also open the mind of, can I bring some science into it? Can I bring some value to religious meaning and purpose in life? And how can they all find their way? The next section actually is going to get into Buddhism and other religions that are theistic. So pausing there, we're at 7:06. Anybody at the Here and Now Center got an idea, thought, something you want to share? Or do you want to give it to the then and there people? So essentially then, what we're doing is getting a context, and he's going to give a view. And as we approach then Buddhist tenets, we're going to start with something very straightforward. What is mind? And then we'll get into that. But I think he's doing a good job of laying a foundation here, of noting The Buddha did not seek to explain the origin of the world, did not seek to explain, how everything came into being. He asked the basic question, why do we suffer when we seek not to suffer? And that's really at the core of Buddhism. If you look at the Four Noble Truths, that's the core. What he will find and what will be elucidated through these volumes is that suffering, that mental emotion, so that those layers of, the layers of afflictive emotions and misperceptions that we are trapped in are created by us and can be eliminated by us. And as we cut through the misperceptions, there's no place for afflictive emotions and these kleshas to arise from. And at the core is what we've been seeking. And so the two paths there is, one is to cultivate that wisdom, or the other one is to eliminate and discard that which obscures. But in either case, there are methods to actually recognize who we really are and what our experience really is. And so therein lies logic, reasoning, experimentation to discover wisdom. True causes of happiness, true causes of suffering. That's where he starts, that's where he'll finish. And still, through all that, still not going to tell you how the world was created. Doesn't really matter. How do I stop creating my suffering? That matters. All right, everybody good out there? How many people going for ice cream? One. I'm thinking about it. I would just, as we eat it, recognize it is a temporary pleasure born of the efforts of many, and there being very interdependent experience that dependently arose as an experience of deliciousness in our lives, for which many people have supported us. All right. Then let me go ahead and get our dedication ready. Just taking a moment to recognize the incredible value of the efforts of others that have given rise to the rare and precious human birth that we currently have, favorable to receiving these precious teachings, and all those that have helped create these conditions, that have tested these methods, that have refined these methods, that have translated, that have practiced, that have passed them down through time, down to the incredible inspiration and efforts of Venerable Thubten Chödron and his Holiness 14th Dalai Lama, and many others that they sought support, help, and guidance from to create these precious teachings for us. And let us dedicate any and all merit that we have cultivated here today for ourselves, to have continued growth in wisdom and for the benefit of others. We do this by reciting our dedication prayer here. By this merit, may I soon attain the enlightened state of Guru Buddha, that I may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their sufferings. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. All right. Well, thank you all so much. Such a joy to be with you all, and try to change my view here where I can see more of you. All right. Be well. Try to stay out of trouble. Have some fun in there and out there. And we'll see you when I'm looking at you. Okay. Thank you all so much.
Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om